Welcome back to another episode of Press Play, Media Strategies from Scot Media Tulsa. This is the podcast where we dive deep into marketing, communications, and public relations. I'm your host, Jeromee Scot, and today we're talking about a powerful tactic that can get your clients the spotlight in major media outlets. It's called newsjacking. If you're a PR or media relations professional, you'll want to stick around as we explore how you can use breaking news to gain coverage, what the media is looking for, and we'll provide some examples of successful newsjacking efforts. All that's just ahead on Press Play. Well, welcome to episode 4 of Press Play. I continue to get some great feedback from this podcast and the blog that is the inspiration for the topics that I cover here on the show. And the last blog that I posted really took off on LinkedIn, and it was about newsjacking. So I kind of talked about one of the strategies I used when I was in corporate communications, and newsjacking was one of my favorite ways to get news coverage. So let's just start with the basics. So what is newsjacking for those who don't know? So in its simplest form, newsjacking is the practice of injecting your brand or your client into a breaking news story to generate media attention. So it's about staying alert to what's happening in the world and making sure that your client is positioned as a key player in that conversation. For example, let's say that there is a major cybersecurity breach that has hit a global corporation, or if you remember, we recently had the cybersecurity issue with Microsoft that took out businesses, airlines, banks across the world. If you have a client who specializes in cybersecurity, you can position them as an expert to comment on that issue, offer solutions, or even share insights on how to prevent breaches like that in the future. That's called newsjacking. So it's finding a way to insert your client and their expertise into the news cycle organically. The media is already covering a story like that. So by using newsjacking, you're really just adding value and expertise to the narrative they're already looking for, which is pretty easy to do. So why does newsjacking work? And why do media outlets embrace it? As I've mentioned in a previous show, journalists and editors, reporters, producers, we're always looking for fresh angles on breaking news, ways to advance those as the story continues to unfold. We all need content that's going to stand out, help us dive deeper into a topic. And so when you as a PR professional can provide an expert in a timely manner or provide a unique perspective on a hot news story or a breaking news story, you're really solving a problem for the journalist, which makes you more likely to get picked up. Second, news stories have pretty short life cycles, and in the media, we work really fast. Newsjacking lets you tap into that urgency by offering something relevant at just the right time. If you have a good relationship with a journalist or with a producer, and you are on a close enough relationship where you can text them, that's usually great. It's an easy way to get their attention and say, hey, I'm aware of something that's unfolding. I have someone who can comment on the record, who can be a source for your story. That's an easy way to get newsjacking to work for you. But timing, of course, is everything. You have to move quickly. Once a story breaks, there's really only a small window before it peaks and starts to decline in relevance. You see that a lot on social media. By the time you start to notice something getting traction, it's already basically halfway through its life cycle. The media moves fast, viewers move fast, social media moves fast. So if you miss that window, the opportunity really is gone or hard to get back. So that really brings us to the key question. How do you, as a PR or media professional, identify the right moments for newsjacking? It's really about being plugged into the news cycle and knowing when and where to use your client's expertise or a narrative. So to do that, to get the most out of newsjacking, it's your responsibility to monitor the news constantly. This means setting up alerts for breaking news stories, making sure you're following major media outlets in real time. I'm not saying you have to be glued to the television at all times, but you need to have an awareness of what's going on. If I asked you to name the big story from the past 4 hours, do you think you could do that? As you could be potentially missing a good newsjacking opportunity. But really, spotting the story alone isn't enough. You have to ask yourself, how does this relate to my client's expertise? How can they offer something valuable to this conversation? So let's say another example is that your client's a financial advisor. If there's suddenly a big shake in the stock market, We've seen that recently. We've seen some pretty highs and lows. When the Nikkei in Japan crashed, it caused a crash in the US market. So we saw that as a huge opportunity to reach out to financial advisors and other economic experts to give us something on the record. And so that was a perfect newsjacking opportunity for clients with financial advisors. And we saw that. We saw some local banks that reached out to us immediately. Some of our PR contacts reached out and said, hey, I have someone who could come on the show the following morning as the stock markets are opening up. It was pretty quick. All that happened within a matter of hours. But really, you can use that to your advantage and quickly position your client as the go-to expert to explain what's happening, provide some actionable insights for the general public. Again, you have to be careful and not make this a commercial for your client. It has to be, again, actionable items, really good expert insight that the general public can use. Let's also say maybe your client is in the healthcare industry. So if there's a new government health initiative that's coming out, this is an election season. We hear a lot of politicians speaking about healthcare. They may be rolling out new policies. If you have a client in the healthcare industry, you could offer them up to the media and use them as kind of a thought leader who can analyze all those implications, provide real world examples of how that policy could impact the healthcare industry or patients in healthcare across the nation. So let's say that you've identified a breaking news story that fits your client's expertise. You don't really know what the next steps are. So there are really 4 easy things that the media is looking for. Number 1 is relevance. So your client's perspective really has to be directly related to the news story. The more closely tied your pitch is to the news event, the better. Speed. As I mentioned earlier, timing is critical. Media outlets are working on very tight deadlines. If you can get your pitch to them quickly, you increase your chances of being included in their media coverage. The third thing is expertise. The media really wants sources that are credible and authoritative. Be sure your client has the credentials to back up their claims. And if they have past media appearances or quotes, articles, TikTok videos, anything they've done that can make them a better pitch, mention those when you contact your media sources. And the fourth thing that the media is looking for is value. So the media needs content that's going to help their readers or their viewers. Can your client offer practical advice, make complex information really easy to understand, or provide a compelling quote? Again, I want to say complex information, easy to understand. You have to remember that most people that are consuming television news or social media are generally not going to understand really complex financial jargon, or you always hear doctors speak in a language that's hard to understand because they use the scientific terms. So you really have to make sure to, if you have a source that's representing healthcare, they've got to dumb it down, speak like the normal person. Again, make that information easy to understand. So really think about how your client could add value to a story, not just push their individual brand or their service. So let's look at just a couple of examples of how brands and individuals have effectively used newsjacking to insert themselves into breaking news stories. One that always comes to mind is Uber. So during natural disasters in the U.S., so for example, when Hurricane Sandy hit the U.S. in 2012, Uber was able to position itself as a company that supported people by offering free rides to and from affected areas. So this allowed them to capitalize on a humanitarian moment while still promoting their service. Another example of that was Airbnb offering housing during natural disasters. So Airbnb will frequently step into media and offer free housing to people who are displaced by storms. So by doing that, they're using newsjacking to, again, target a larger humanitarian story by offering to help. But it's important to know that newsjacking doesn't always work out like companies might think. So if you remember back when the late Carrie Fisher passed away, of course, she was famous for her role as Princess Leia in Star Wars. So Cinnabon tweeted a tribute image featuring Princess Leia with her iconic hairstyle recreating the Cinnabon cinnamon rolls. And that tweet was initially picked up and garnered a lot of attention. It was circulated, but later deleted due to backlash. Some people thought it was insensitive, and it backfired on this case. So the brand's approach in that case was perceived as kind of tone deaf. It offered a lesson in the risk of newsjacking during some more sensitive moments. So you really have to be careful. I would recommend to any media professional that if you are thinking about newsjacking or you have a strategy in place in preparation for newsjacking, that you have run that through multiple channels within your organization, have everyone take an objective look at it and see if there's a way that could be turned negative. So have people actively look for that. What will people on the internet say about this? Could this be retweeted or perceived in a negative light? Because maybe newsjacking could do more harm than good. So let's talk a little bit about some local examples. So I use some kind of big picture, big company examples of newsjacking, but if you're working on a local level with local news, there are easy ways to do that as well. I mentioned severe weather earlier with Uber and Airbnb. Local businesses can do that as well. If your business specializes in something like home repair, roofing, insurance, emergency supplies, or helping people in an emergency, this really can be an opportunity to offer expert advice or resources. You can reach out to local news stations offering tips on storm preparedness, advice on damage control, how to file an insurance claim after a storm, or how to access your services or widespread services if you're an expert in that area. If there's a new local law or city regulation that's passed, like zoning changes, tax hikes, restrictions that could affect businesses in your area, if your business is impacted by that or your client's businesses, you can offer them up to comment or analysis to local reporters. If you're in real estate, law, or another industry that's affected by regulations, you can highlight how that law will influence local residents or businesses, and again, provide some expert insight that's not pushy. You don't want to push the brand. You want to offer expert insight that everyone can benefit from. And then another example is like during the holiday season, local news stations are frequently covering charitable events, community outreach programs, holiday themed initiatives. And if your client's business or organization either sponsors a charity event, has a food drive, or any other holiday related activity, that's an easy way to newsjack the holiday season. News organizations are going to be covering the holidays, so offer your client up to the local media to spotlight their involvement in the cause that you're supporting. So those are just some examples. Again, newsjacking for me in corporate communications was one of my favorite things to do. I'm a news junkie, so I always had my pulse on the news. I knew what was going on and would see those as easy opportunities to promote whatever I was working on or my client's mission or brand. Newsjacking can be really fun if you understand it and learn about it and learn how to do it effectively. It's really a powerful way for you as a PR professional to get your clients in front of the media, but it does require vigilance, speed, and strategy. You have to monitor the news, look for those opportunities, and act fast when you see the right moment. If you can master that technique, you're really going to be able to generate significant coverage and visibility for your clients, and trust me, your clients will thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Press Play. If you found this episode helpful, make sure to tell a friend, a PR client, subscribe to it. We're on Spotify. We're on Apple Music. I'm on YouTube now as well. If you could share, I would really appreciate that. I also want to mention too, don't forget you can check out my free ebook. It's called Media Mastery, Building Strong Relationships and Managing Reputation. You can find that on my website. It is free. You don't have to provide an email address or a name or a phone number. Go to it, download it. You can find that at scotmediatulsa.com. That's Scott with one T, SCOT, mediatulsa.com. That's it for today's episode of Press Play. I appreciate you listening, and we'll see you next week.